Maya's W-2 last year showed $340,000. She works as a lead engineer at a Fortune 500 tech company in Austin, in a glass office tower downtown. Her husband makes another $160,000 running a small consulting firm out of their home. Together, they bring in $500,000 a year. There's a 4-bedroom house in a quiet suburban neighborhood with good schools. A Range Rover sits in the garage next to a leased Audi sedan. Their 2 kids attend a private elementary school. The family takes a real vacation every winter and shorter trips throughout the year. Last March, Maya's transmission gave out. The repair quote came in at $4,800. She put it on a credit card. Not because she wanted the rewards points, because she didn't have the cash sitting in her checking account. This isn't a punchline. According to a 2026 Goldman Sachs report, 40% of Americans earning over $500,000 a year live paycheck to paycheck. Another 41% of those earning between $300,000 and $500,000 report the same condition. Read that twice. 4 out of 10 people pulling in $500,000 annually feel like they have no financial cushion. They earn in a month what most Americans earn in a year. They're still anxious about money. This is the high-income poverty trap. It's a structural problem with measurable inputs and predictable outputs. The trap doesn't care how much you make. It cares how much of it escapes your grip before the next paycheck arrives. The most dangerous part isn't the trap itself. It's that almost nobody caught in it can see it from the inside. They keep waiting for the next raise to fix it. Today we walk through exactly how this trap operates in 2026, why bigger paychecks have stopped solving financial problems, and what separates the high earners who actually build wealth from the ones who hit retirement with nothing. The personal savings rate in the United States hit 4.5% in January of 2026. By February, it had dropped to 4.0%. In March, it fell again, settling at 3.6%. That number isn't tracking the working poor. It tracks all Americans, including the ones earning multiple 6 figures. Right now, we are saving less of our money than at almost any point in modern history, even while disposable personal income climbs above $23 trillion annually. Back the math up to the household level for a moment. A family bringing home $6,000 a month after taxes saves about $216 at a 3.6% rate. One unexpected dental bill wipes that out. A single emergency room visit empties it twice over. Now apply the same logic to a household earning $20,000 a month after taxes. They save $720 at the same rate. That sounds better. It isn't. The family making $20,000 a month spends roughly $20,000 a month, and their fixed costs are calibrated to their income. Their emergencies also scale up. A transmission on a Range Rover costs 4 times what a transmission on a Toyota Camry costs. A roof replacement on a 6,000 square foot home runs 3 times what a roof on a typical 3-bedroom runs. The bills scale up faster than the savings do. This is the first thing the trap obscures. People assume that higher income automatically means more breathing room. The math says otherwise. According to a Harris poll, more than half of 6-figure earners said they would need to double their income to feel financially secure. 3/4 reported using a credit card recently because they ran out of cash. These aren't people on the edge of poverty. These are doctors, lawyers, software engineers, and finance executives sitting in corner offices in Manhattan high-rises and gleaming corporate campuses. Society has spent decades telling us these people are wealthy. Their experience contradicts the assumption because of something economists call lifestyle inflation. The term sounds technical. The phenomenon is mundane. You got a raise. You use the raise to upgrade something. The upgrade got absorbed into your baseline. A year later, you can't remember a time when you didn't have it, and the next raise has to go somewhere else. The pattern starts harmlessly. Your first real apartment after college had a stove that actually worked. Your second apartment had a dishwasher. The house you bought 5 years later has granite countertops and a walk-in pantry. Each upgrade felt deserved. Each upgrade was. The problem isn't the upgrade. The problem is that you didn't save the difference. The cost of the new lifestyle didn't replace your old lifestyle, it stacked on top of it. By the time someone hits $250,000 in annual income, the stack has gotten tall. There's a mortgage on a house bigger than the one their parents owned. 2 reliable vehicles sit in the driveway. There are subscriptions to streaming services, meal kits, a gym, productivity software. Quarterly trips happen to visit family. An annual vacation gets booked at a decent resort. Charitable giving feels good. Donations go to the kids' school. Retirement contributions feel responsible. And all of it leaves roughly nothing at the end of the month. The math here is dangerous because nothing on the list looks unreasonable. Each item has a justification. Each item connects to a value the person believes in. They aren't blowing money on yachts or champagne. They're spending it on stability, on family, on health, on convenience, on a life that looks responsible from every angle. The cumulative effect of all that responsible spending is mathematically identical to reckless spending. A dollar that doesn't get saved doesn't care what reason kept it from getting saved. It just doesn't compound. It doesn't grow. It never becomes the retirement that funds the second half of your life. 30 years of those dollars failing to compound is the difference between a comfortable 70-year-old sitting on a porch in Florida and a frightened one watching the mailbox for a Social Security check. The trap isn't a single decision. It's the accumulation of 1,000 reasonable ones. David and Priya bought their dream home in 2024 outside Seattle. They paid $1.2 million for a 4-bedroom craftsman with a view of the Cascades. With 20% down, their mortgage came to $960,000 at a 6.8% rate, locking them into a monthly payment of around $6,260 in principal and interest alone. Property taxes added another $1,400 a month. Homeowners insurance added $250. Their all-in monthly housing cost reached nearly $8,000 before they replaced a single light bulb. David earns $410,000 a year as a senior product manager at a major tech company. Priya is a physician earning $290,000 at a Seattle hospital. On paper, they qualified easily. Their debt-to-income ratio sat just under 40%, which most major lenders accept without blinking. The bank approved them in 2 weeks. They signed at a downtown title office on a sunny Tuesday in October. 2 years later, their savings account holds $11,000. They have not made a single retirement contribution beyond their employer match in 18 months. Last winter, their HVAC unit died. They financed the replacement at 9% interest over 36 months because the alternative was draining their cash reserve to zero. The math of David and Priya's situation isn't about poor decision-making. It's about a system designed to maximize what you can borrow rather than what you should borrow. American mortgage lenders will routinely approve borrowers at debt-to-income ratios up to 43%. Some FHA programs go higher. The credit score required to qualify hasn't fundamentally changed in 20 years, while the size of the loans those scores unlock has expanded dramatically. The median first-time homebuyer in America is now 40 years old, according to Zillow data reported by Fortune. In 1981, that same median sat at 29. The 11-year shift didn't happen because people got lazier. It happened because the gap between what houses cost and what people earn keeps widening, even at the high end of the income distribution. A house that cost $300,000 in 2015 in many West Coast and Northeast markets now costs $800,000 or more. Wages haven't risen at that pace, so buyers with strong incomes stretch further than they should. They use every dollar of qualifying income to maximize the loan. They end up with monthly payments that consume half of their take-home pay. Total mortgage debt in the United States reached $13.191 trillion as of Q1 2026, averaging $269,562 per household. That figure isn't the problem on its own. Mortgage debt is generally considered productive debt because it builds equity in an appreciating asset. The problem is what the mortgage payment crowds out. When $7,000 or $8,000 of your monthly income goes to housing, the remaining cash flow can't simultaneously fund retirement savings, an emergency fund, college accounts, and a normal lifestyle. Something has to give. For most families, what gives is the future. Financial planners use a specific phrase for what David and Priya are experiencing: house poor. The condition of owning a beautiful home that owns you back. The luxury kitchen that came at the cost of any flexibility in the budget. The 4 bedrooms you can't afford to furnish. The pool you can't afford to heat in winter. The condition compounds in ways most buyers don't anticipate. Higher property values mean higher property taxes, which get reassessed regularly upward in growing markets. Kiplinger calls this escrow creep, and it eats away at the budget silently. The mortgage payment you sign for at $6,200 becomes $6,600, then $7,000, then $7,400, without you ever refinancing or upgrading anything. Insurance does the same. Hurricane coverage in Florida has doubled in some markets over the last 5 years. Wildfire premiums in California have tripled in certain zip codes. The fixed cost was never actually fixed. It just increased slowly enough that you didn't notice until you couldn't afford to leave. Leaving is the thing most house-poor families never seriously consider. Selling and downsizing feels like failure, like admitting the dream was too big. So they stay, they keep paying, and wealth accumulation effectively stops for the duration of the mortgage. Fortune's coverage of the 2026 housing market used the phrase "on thin ice" to describe what's currently happening to 6-figure earners caught in this exact bind. The fix isn't complicated, it's emotionally hard. Before you buy, calculate the total monthly cost of ownership at the high end of likely future scenarios, not the low end. Mortgage plus tax plus insurance plus an average maintenance reserve, which most experts now put at 1 to 2% of home value annually. Add an HVAC replacement fund. Add a roof fund. Add a "what if mortgage rates keep refinancing impossible for a decade" fund. Then compare that total to your take-home income and ask honestly whether the lifestyle remaining is the lifestyle you actually want to live. Almost nobody runs this calculation before signing. They look at the mortgage payment in isolation, decide they can swing it, and then live with the consequences for 30 years. Here's a calculation that almost nobody runs before signing a finance contract. The average new car payment in the United States hit $767 per month in the fourth quarter of 2025, then settled to around $748 in early 2026, according to Bankrate and Experian. New car payments above $1,000 now make up nearly 19% of all new auto loans. For perspective, roughly 1 in 5 new car buyers signed a contract committing them to $12,000 a year in vehicle payments before insurance, gas, maintenance, or registration entered the conversation. Now run the alternative math. A reliable 3-year-old certified pre-owned sedan financed for 36 months can be had for roughly $300 a month. The difference between that and a typical new car payment is $450 per month. Take that $450 and invest it in a low-cost index fund averaging 8% annual returns. Over 30 years, the math gives you about $670,000. Over 40 years, it gives you $1.5 million. That's the real price tag of every new car you finance. Not the sticker price, not the monthly payment. It's the retirement you're forfeiting to drive something nicer for 3 years until you forget you ever wanted it. This calculation gets brushed aside more than any other in personal finance because nobody likes hearing it. The car is the second most visible signal of social status in American life, behind only the house. Pulling into a corporate parking lot in a 6-year-old Camry communicates something different than pulling in with a brand new Lexus. Even people who claim not to care about that signaling do, subconsciously, quietly. They just don't admit it out loud. The result is a market where Americans now collectively owe $1.667 trillion in auto loan debt as of late 2025, according to LendingTree and the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. That's slightly more than total U.S. student loan debt. The average new auto loan reaches $43,582. The average used loan reaches $27,528. Loan terms have stretched to 6 and 7 years to keep monthly payments manageable, which means buyers are paying interest on vehicles long after those cars have depreciated below the remaining loan balance. The trap for high earners specifically operates differently than for everyone else. When you make $250,000 a year, a $750 car payment doesn't feel like a financial decision. It feels like a rounding error. You barely notice it leaving your account. The dealership knows this. The finance manager knows this. The lease specialist absolutely knows this. They've calibrated their pitches around the psychological reality that high earners experience individual line items as small, even when the cumulative drain is massive. Psychologists have a name for the underlying phenomenon: the denomination effect. People treat money differently depending on how it's framed. $10 feels like $10. $10,000 spread across 36 months of $750 payments feels like roughly nothing. The mind doesn't aggregate the total. Dealerships have exploited this for decades, and luxury automakers have refined it into an art form. Lease pitches in particular are constructed around making the buyer focus on the monthly cost rather than the total cost over the life of the lease. Here's what happens when you lease instead of buy. You get a brand new vehicle every 3 years, and your monthly payment never goes away. You never own equity in a car. You pay the depreciation curve, which is steepest in those first 3 years, and then hand the vehicle back. The cycle restarts. There is no point in your working life when you are not making a car payment. The car payment becomes a permanent feature of your budget, like rent. Except, unlike rent, it produces no shelter, no warmth, and no equity. For someone earning $400,000 who leases 2 luxury vehicles continuously from age 30 to age 60, the lifetime cost runs roughly $650,000 in lease payments alone. That same $650,000, invested progressively at a 7% return, would grow to over $1.4 million by retirement. The comparison isn't between a luxury car and a reliable one. It's between a luxury lease cycle and owning paid-off vehicles while investing the difference. The cost of looking the part is roughly the cost of a second retirement. Almost nobody at the high earner level frames the decision this way. They frame it as, I work hard and I deserve a nice car. The deserve frame is one of the most reliable wealth destroyers in personal finance. It feels morally unimpeachable, which is what makes it so dangerous. The math doesn't care whether you deserve the car. The math only cares whether the money you spent on it could also have been working for you somewhere else. Once you start running the calculation honestly, the car decision becomes one of the easiest places to recover lost ground. Drive a reliable used vehicle for the next 10 years. Bank the difference. Let the compounding do work you couldn't do on your own. So where does the rest of it go? When you sit down with someone earning $300,000 a year and ask them to itemize their monthly spending, the housing and the cars usually account for less than half. The other half disappears into categories that don't feel like categories. There are streaming services, food delivery, the kids' activities, the Amazon Prime subscription, plus the constant Amazon orders, eating out 3 times a week because everyone's too tired to cook, the cleaning service, the lawn service, the gym membership nobody uses, the therapist, the chiropractor, the $700 phone replaced every 2 years for both adults, plus one for each kid, the Apple Care for all of them. None of these is unreasonable on its own. Stacked together, they form a recurring monthly expense that easily reaches $5,000 in a typical high-earner household and $10,000 in a higher-earner one. That's $60,000 to $120,000 a year, gone, distributed across a constellation of charges so small that no individual one feels like a decision worth examining. The most expensive of these invisible bleeders for households with young children is childcare. Care.com's 2025 data shows the average annual cost of full-time daycare for one infant exceeds $17,000 nationally. In high-cost states like Massachusetts, California, Washington, and the District of Columbia, that number climbs above $24,000. For 2 children, with 1 infant and 1 toddler, families now pay an average of $28,000 a year. In some metropolitan markets, that exceeds the cost of rent on a three-bedroom apartment. Parents surveyed by Care.com report that childcare consumes about 20% of their household income. Factor in the other caregiving costs, including help for aging parents, pet care, and household services, and the average family spends 37% of their income on care-related expenses. That's the largest single budget category for many high-earner families during the very years they should be saving most aggressively, namely their 30s and early 40s. The trap isn't childcare itself. You need childcare. The trap is not accounting for it properly when making every other financial decision. Families buy expensive houses and lease expensive cars and then discover they can't afford quality childcare. Or they can afford it but nothing else, leaving them with no savings, no investments, and no cushion for emergencies. They simply tread water through the most expensive years of their lives, hoping their income outpaces the expense before the kids age out of daycare and into the next set of costs. The costs don't stop, they transform. Daycare exits and gets replaced by after-school programs, sports leagues, summer camps, music lessons, tutoring, orthodontia. Private school, for families that choose it, runs $20,000 to $50,000 per child per year in major metro areas. By the time the kids reach high school, the total annual investment in their development can exceed what some families spend on their mortgage. Beyond child-related expenses, high earners pay what could fairly be called the convenience tax. It's the premium you spend to make life easier because you're tired and your time is genuinely valuable. 2 DoorDash orders per week for a family of 4 run $80 per delivery, or roughly $6,400 a year. Coffee runs at $15 a day, total $6,000 a year. A weekly house cleaner at $150 per visit costs another $7,800. Add dry cleaning, gardening, pool service, and the monthly subscription boxes nobody fully unpacks. None of it qualifies as luxury in any meaningful sense. All of it is paid for with after-tax dollars, which means the actual gross income required to fund it is roughly 30% higher than the sticker price suggests. Then there's the deeper structural layer that financial planners sometimes call lifestyle commitments. These are expenses that look like one-time decisions, but actually function as long-term fixed costs. The vacation home in Tahoe you only visit 4 weekends a year, plus maintenance and HOA fees. The boat parked at the marina, the country club membership, the second car for the teenager. Once you commit to any of them, undoing the commitment feels socially painful. Selling the vacation home feels like a public admission that things aren't going well. Resigning from the club feels like demotion, and parking the boat permanently feels like accepting some kind of defeat. So you keep paying. The lifestyle commitment becomes a permanent feature of your financial life. According to Clarify Capital research published in 2025, six-figure earners are responding to financial pressure in revealing ways. 47% are cutting back on travel. Significant percentages are pulling back on dining out, on streaming services, and on retirement contributions. The categories at the top of the cut list are also the categories that, in aggregate, were quietly draining the budget for years. The audit only happens after the damage, almost never before. The fix is mundane and brutal. Sit down once a quarter, list every recurring charge across every bank account, every credit card, every subscription service. Highlight the ones you forgot you had. Cancel them. Highlight the ones you use but could replace with cheaper or free alternatives. Replace them. Highlight the lifestyle commitments that no longer match the priority they once seemed to. Exit them. The exercise takes 90 minutes. People avoid it because it forces them to confront how much they're spending on things they don't even remember choosing. If you followed me this far, you already know this video isn't about lecturing high earners. It's about the math that explains why so many of them feel stuck despite earning what should be life-changing money. If that math is useful to you, subscribe and stick around. I cover the structural side of personal finance every week, the side most channels skip in favor of side hustle clickbait. Now let's get into the savings rate illusion, which might be the single most expensive misunderstanding in high-income personal finance. Here's the counterintuitive claim. Plenty of high earners are saving less as a percentage of income than people earning a third of what they make. You'd expect the opposite. You'd expect the engineer making $300,000 a year to be saving 20% of her paycheck, while the school teacher making $60,000 struggles to save it all. The opposite is closer to the truth for a meaningful slice of high earners. Here is why. When a young professional starts working, they often set up a single retirement vehicle, usually a Roth IRA, sometimes a 401k contribution at the level their employer matches. For 2026, the Roth IRA limit sits at $7,500, including the catch-up provision for those over 50. That's the entire annual savings ceiling for many high earners who never escalate beyond their initial setup. A $7,500 Roth contribution on a $100,000 salary is a 7.5% savings rate. Not amazing, but acceptable. The same contribution on a $300,000 salary becomes 2.5%. On a $500,000 salary, it's 1.5%. The contribution stayed flat, the income tripled, the savings rate collapsed. This is what the Money Guy show's Bo Hansen was getting at when he warned about the classic trap. Someone starts saving, maxes out a Roth IRA, lets the income climb, and never increases the contribution. The maxed Roth feels responsible because it represents the legal cap. It's the most you can contribute to that specific vehicle. The fact that you could be sheltering tens of thousands of additional dollars in other vehicles never registers, because those vehicles require more deliberate setup. The 2026 standard 401k contribution limit is $24,500, with an $8,000 catch-up for workers ages 50 and older, and a special super catch-up of $11,250 for ages 60 through 63. Stack those together, and a high earner in their early 60s can legally contribute $35,750 to their 401k in a single year. Almost nobody in that bracket actually does. Beyond the basic 401k, the tax code allows what are called after-tax contributions in many corporate plans, which can be converted to Roth through what financial planners call the mega backdoor Roth strategy. The total annual limit for all 401k contributions combined, including employer match and after-tax dollars, sits at $70,000 for 2026 or $77,500 including the standard catch-up. Add a health savings account if you're on a high-deductible health plan with its 2026 limit of $4,400 for individuals or $8,750 for families, and the total tax-advantaged shelter available to a high earner exceeds $80,000 per year. That's an order of magnitude more than the Roth IRA maximum. Almost no one uses any of this fully, not because they don't want to, because they don't know it's there. Here is the specific math of what gets lost. The 25 times rule, often called the 4% rule, says you need approximately 25 times your annual spending saved by retirement to safely fund a typical 30-year retirement. A high earner who's gotten comfortable spending $300,000 a year needs roughly $7.5 million to maintain that lifestyle in retirement. Fidelity's broader guideline says high earners typically need 10 to 12 times final salary by retirement age. For someone earning $500,000 at retirement, that's $5 to $6 million minimum. Now compare those targets to a real-world high earner savings rate of 2 or 3%. At a 3% savings rate, $15,000 per year on a $500,000 salary, invested at a 7% return over 25 years, grows to approximately $948,000, less than $1 million, against a need of $5 to $6 million. The shortfall is structural, not accidental. The math literally cannot work. What does work is escalating contributions in lockstep with income. The rule of thumb most financial planners now recommend for high earners is 20% of gross income going to retirement, including all matches and after-tax contributions. For someone earning $300,000, that's $60,000 a year. For someone earning $500,000, that's $100,000 a year. Hit that number consistently for 25 years, and you cross the retirement target naturally, without any dramatic lifestyle reduction. The reason most high earners never get there is partly ignorance, partly inertia. Setting up a mega backdoor Roth requires understanding plan documents most people never read. Maxing the HSA requires switching to a high-deductible health plan, which feels scary even when it's mathematically superior. Bumping the 401k contribution requires logging into the plan portal, which most people do once when they get hired and never again. Each individual step is small. The cumulative effect of not taking them is several $1,000,000 over a career. Vanguard's data for year-end 2025 showed the average 401k balance sitting at $167,970. The median was only $44,115. For a high earner, those numbers should feel terrifying because they include the entire workforce, including the doctors and lawyers and finance professionals you're competing with for retirement comfort 30 years from now. The savings rate illusion is the gap between what your brain registers as saving and what the math actually counts as saving. Closing that gap is the single most lucrative move available to most high earners alive today. A 1958 Plymouth station wagon. That's what Thomas Stanley reported finding parked in the driveways of America's millionaires when he conducted the research that became The Millionaire Next Door. The book, published in 1996 and updated multiple times since, remains one of the most rigorous empirical studies of actual American wealth holders ever conducted. Stanley and his co-author William Danko interviewed people who had quietly accumulated 7 or 8 figures over careers nobody noticed. What did those millionaires drive? Mid-range American sedans, mostly purchased used. What watches did they wear? Timex and Seiko often. What houses did they live in? Modest ones, often the same houses they'd bought in their 30s, in neighborhoods that hadn't drifted dramatically upmarket. What did they wear to work? Suits that were 5 years old, shoes that had been resold at least once. Stanley and Danko's central insight was that visible consumption and actual wealth are inversely correlated in the American economy. The people who look rich aren't. The people who are rich don't look it. The reason has to do with what economists call positional goods, items whose value comes primarily from signaling status to others rather than from any inherent utility. A luxury watch tells time. A Timex also tells time. The price difference is the cost of the signal. The wealth difference, accumulated across decades of similar signaling decisions, is enormous. Stanley and Danko called this the better than theory. Each visible purchase represents an attempt to signal superiority over someone in the immediate social environment, whether that's a better car than the neighbor, a better watch than a colleague, or a better vacation than a sibling. Each individual decision feels minor. The aggregate cost across a lifetime of these decisions reaches astronomical numbers. Their research called these $1,000,000 choices, because if the buyer had made the opposite decision and invested the difference, they would have ended up with at least an additional $1,000,000 in net worth. The cigarette example from their original research makes the math visceral. One couple smoked 3 packs a day for 46 years. The cumulative cost of those cigarettes exceeded the value of their home by $33,000. Had they invested that money instead, the portfolio would have exceeded $2 million by the end of the period. Status purchases work the same way. The difference between a $30,000 car and an $80,000 car invested over 25 years at a 7% return becomes roughly $270,000. That's the real price of looking wealthy. The cultural programming that drives visible consumption starts early and reinforces constantly. Stanley and Danko observed that young people are indoctrinated with the belief that those who have money spend lavishly, and that if you don't display wealth, you don't actually have wealth. The message comes from everywhere. Television shows glamorous lifestyles. Social media displays curated consumption. Advertising promises that purchases will transform identity. The message is consistent across every channel. Rich people look rich. If you want to be seen as successful, you need to display your success through consumption. The belief is demonstrably false, but its effects are real. Someone who internalizes the narrative will spend their entire income maintaining appearances. They'll finance a lifestyle that signals wealth while quietly destroying their actual net worth. Something interesting has been happening since around 2020 that financial researchers call the quiet luxury or stealth wealth trend. Bain & Company's 2024 luxury report found that affluent consumers are increasingly prioritizing longevity, craftsmanship, and discretion over conspicuous logos. A 2024 Accenture survey found that 52% of global shoppers now prefer influencers who showcase practical luxury rather than aspirational excess. After the HBO series Succession ended its run, internet searches for the brand Loro Piana, worn by the show's wealthy characters in muted, unbranded fashion, spiked globally. The appeal wasn't flashy logos. The appeal was the opposite. Wealth that only people who already understand it can recognize. The shift reflects something deeper than fashion. It reflects a growing cultural recognition that visible wealth has costs that invisible wealth avoids. The person driving a 5-year-old paid-off Toyota Highlander is not poorer than the person leasing a brand new BMW. Often they are dramatically richer. The Highlander driver simply allocated capital differently. The BMW driver allocated capital toward a depreciating signal whose informational content is now diluted to near meaninglessness anyway, because the BMW is also financed by half the people on the road. There is a phrase that captures the dynamic well. Real wealth whispers, never quite needing anyone to notice, never requiring outside validation, and existing whether or not anyone else can see it. The goal of building wealth isn't to look rich. The goal is to actually be rich, with all the optionality and security that produces over a lifetime. The status signal tax is what you pay for choosing the appearance of wealth over the substance of it. Once you start running the math on individual decisions, the price tag becomes visible. A leased Range Rover at $1,200 a month is $14,400 a year. Over 20 years, that's almost $290,000 in payments, plus interest and depreciation. The same amount invested over the same period grows to about $600,000. That's the real cost of the badge. Almost nobody runs the calculation because the result is uncomfortable. It forces a confrontation with the fact that your hardest hours of work this year went to financing things that won't matter in 5 years and definitely won't matter in 25. $18.8 trillion. That's what American households collectively owed at the end of the first quarter of 2026, according to the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. Divided across roughly 134 million households, that's an average of $105,444 in debt per household. Mortgage debt accounts for the bulk of it. The categories below mortgage tell the more revealing story. The average household credit card balance hits $6,715, with total U.S. credit card debt climbing to $1.252 trillion. The average annual percentage rate on those balances reached 21% in the first quarter of 2026, with new credit card offers averaging 23.79%. Carrying the average balance at the average rate generates roughly $1,410 per year in interest charges alone. That's money you're paying for the privilege of having spent money you didn't actually have a year or two ago. Total auto loan debt reached $1.667 trillion by late 2025, slightly higher than total U.S. student loan debt. Auto delinquencies have begun to rise. The Federal Reserve's most recent consumer credit survey showed 14% of consumers reporting they were at risk of missing a minimum debt payment in the next 3 months. Most notably, the increase in debt-related anxiety was greatest among households earning over $100,000 annually. Take a moment with that finding. The people most worried about missing minimum debt payments aren't the ones earning the least. They're the ones earning the most. The reason is that high earners normalize debt in ways lower earners don't have the option to. When you're earning $60,000 a year and you want to buy something, You either save for it or accept that you can't have it right now. When you're earning $200,000, you have options. You can put it on a credit card and pay it off over the next quarter, take out a personal loan, draw from a home equity line of credit, or finance directly through the retailer at 0% for 12 months. Every purchase becomes optional with respect to whether you actually have the cash on hand. That optionality is dangerous. It lets the lifestyle expand faster than the income, indefinitely, until something forces a reckoning. 3/4 of six-figure earners surveyed by Harris reported using a credit card recently because they had run out of cash. That's not the sign of a one-time emergency. That's the sign of a system in which the cash buffer never properly existed in the first place. The debt becomes normalized because everyone around you is also carrying it. Your neighbors have mortgages. Your colleagues have car payments. Your friends have credit card balances they're working on. Nobody in your social circle is openly debt-free. The norm becomes manageable debt across multiple categories, which sounds responsible, but which mathematically means you never have actual wealth, just a series of obligations whose payments happen to fit inside your monthly income. There's a useful frame for thinking about all of this. If you stopped getting paid tomorrow, how many months could you continue your current lifestyle before running out of money? The honest answer for most high earners is 1 to 3 months. For some, it's less. For very few, is it more than 6. That number, the months of runway, is a better measure of actual financial security than your income, your title, or your tax bracket. People with 12 months of runway sleep differently from people with 2. The math is identical regardless of how much they earn. 61% of Americans with credit card debt have been in debt for at least a year, up from 53% the year before. Debt is becoming chronic rather than temporary, even at the top of the income distribution. The trap tightens precisely because the lifestyle is so difficult to reverse. Pulling a child out of private school feels impossible. Selling a vacation home feels like failure, and downgrading the car feels like a public admission that things aren't going well. So the debt sits, the interest accumulates, and the wealth never appears. Picture 2 engineers, both 34 years old, both earning $250,000 a year at the same tech company. Both are married, both have 1 child and another on the way. They live in the same city. Their gross incomes are identical. The first engineer, call him Daniel, has done what most of his peers did. He bought a $900,000 house with a 6.8% mortgage. He leases 2 SUVs. He enrolled the child in a private preschool that costs $26,000 a year. He puts the maximum into his Roth IRA every year, which feels responsible. His net worth at 34, after subtracting all debts, sits at roughly negative $50,000. He is technically underwater. The second engineer, call her Amira, made different choices, none of them dramatic. She bought a $550,000 townhouse on a 15-year mortgage in a slightly less prestigious neighborhood. She drives a 4-year-old, paid-off Honda Pilot, and her husband drives a paid-off Camry. Their daughter attends a high-quality public preschool that's free. Amira contributes the full $24,500 to her 401k, adds another $7,000 to a Roth IRA, and routes another $20,000 annually to a taxable brokerage account for after-tax investing. Her family's net worth at 34 sits at roughly $240,000. By the time these 2 engineers reach age 50, assuming continued 7% investment returns and no further income changes, Amira's projected net worth exceeds $3.2 million. Daniel's, if he maintains his current trajectory, will hover somewhere around $800,000, most of it locked in home equity he can't easily access without selling the house. Their incomes have been identical for 16 years. Their net worths differ by more than $2 million. Here's the framework that produces Amira's outcome. It's 3 rules. They're not complicated. They are uncomfortable, which is why most people skip them. Rule 1. Define enough before your income makes excess possible. Almost nobody decides in advance what level of lifestyle satisfies them. They let the income decide for them, which means the lifestyle expands to consume whatever's available. People who build wealth have an internal ceiling. They know what neighborhood, what house size, what vehicle category, what vacation tier feels right for them. and they stop scaling once they reach it, even when their income continues climbing. Rule 2. Save half of every raise, automatically, before the lifestyle has a chance to absorb it. A promotion bumps your salary by $20,000. Immediately increase your 401k and HSA contributions by $10,000. The remaining $10,000 becomes lifestyle. Your life improves. Your wealth also improves. Both happen because the decision was made in advance, by you, before social and habit pressure could redirect the money elsewhere. Rule 3. Automate aggressively. The brain is bad at resisting present temptation and good at accepting completed decisions. Set up automatic transfers from every paycheck into retirement accounts, brokerage accounts, and emergency savings on the day the paycheck arrives. The money that doesn't reach your checking account is not experienced as available. The lifestyle calibrates around what's left, not what could have been. This is the most powerful behavioral trick in personal finance, and it costs nothing. These rules sound mechanical because they are. That's their strength. They strip the wealth-building decision out of the daily emotional grind and put it on autopilot. The high earners who actually build wealth don't have more willpower than the ones who don't. They have better systems. But systems only work when you understand why the systems matter. Mechanical execution without conceptual understanding tends to break under pressure. When the next raise hits, when the new house listing appears in your inbox, when a colleague pulls up in a vehicle that makes yours look dated, the system has to hold against the urge to abandon it. That kind of holding requires a foundation that goes beyond the rules themselves. That foundation is financial literacy, the basic vocabulary and basic math of how money actually works. Compound interest, opportunity cost, the difference between an asset and a liability, what taxes do to your effective income, what inflation does to your purchasing power over time, what diversification really means, what your real rate of return looks like once fees and inflation get subtracted. Without that foundation, the rules are just instructions someone else gave you. With it, they become tools you can adapt to your own life and your own situation. Maya, the engineer from the opening of this video, doesn't represent a failure of effort. She and her husband worked extraordinarily hard to earn that $500,000 combined income. They went to good schools, they took the high-pressure jobs, they sacrificed weekends and sleep and time with friends to get to where they are. What they didn't do, and what almost nobody at their level ever does, is build the conceptual framework that converts a high income into actual wealth. That conversion isn't automatic. It doesn't happen because you finally made enough money. It happens because you understood how the system worked and made the right small decisions over and over for years until they accumulated into something real. The traps we walk through today are visible once you know to look for them. There's the housing decision that overextends the budget for 30 years, the car cycle that drains $1 million of potential retirement money, the invisible bleeders that quietly take $50,000 a year, the savings vehicles you didn't know existed, the status purchases that buy nothing real, the debt that becomes chronic before you notice it normalizing. Knowing the traps is half the battle. The other half is having the foundation that lets you avoid them under pressure. A lot of people watch a video like this, feel motivated for a week, then drift back into the patterns of the people around them. The difference between drifting back and actually changing comes down to how deeply you understand the underlying principles. Compound interest stops being abstract when you can calculate it on the back of a napkin. Opportunity cost stops being theoretical when you can name what your next purchase is actually costing you in long-term net worth. For anyone who hasn't yet built that foundation, that's the place to begin. The starting point of any real finance journey isn't a stock pick or a side hustle or a budgeting app. It's understanding the language and the math underneath everything else. Once that's solid, every video like this one becomes immediately useful. Without it, the information tends to slide off after a week. There's a video on this channel that walks through that exact foundation in plain English, starting from zero, with no assumed background. If anything in today's breakdown made you realize you've been operating without the base layer in place, that's the video that builds it. Everything else gets easier once it's solid.